Helicopter operations are becoming much more complex, and so is the aviation safety component of helicopter operations. This video will help you develop your own safety management system. Safety management systems are going to be an ICAO and FAA requirement in the near future, so now is a good time to get started with your program. A safety management system is a coordinated set of processes designed to provide an organized and practical method for controlling risks and hazards. In other words, it's a network of programs and activities that will allow you to maintain control over the key factors that affect safety.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm not a huge operator. I have 2 helicopters on a grass field in the back and 10 people working for me. I don't have the time or resources to spend on something like this.
A safety management system doesn't have to be costly or complex. It's something that you design and tailor to fit the size and goals of your organization.
So what do I have to do now?
You can get a start on building your own SMS by using the SMS toolkit that's provided on the International Helicopter Safety Team website, ihst.org. It's a 40-page document. The first 20 pages explain what a safety management system is and define the attributes in broad terms. The second 20 pages are a template where you can substitute your company's name and information into the model. As you do this, as you go through and fill in the blanks, you're not only gaining an understanding of how an SMS works, you're actually building the basic foundation of your own system. Now let's take a look at the 12 fundamental attributes of a successful safety management system. The management plan for your company defines how you're going to manage your safety effort. So it has to fit your objectives and how you want to accomplish them. A good place to start is by clearly establishing what your safety objectives are. You can do this in the form of a letter. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be 1 or 2 paragraphs, and it just says, here at Fred's Helicopters, safety is going to be our first priority. It's going to be part of everything we do. We're going to be known for it, and this is how we're going to accomplish it. If you have a safety officer, they can draft the letter, but it has to be signed by the highest level of management to demonstrate the organization's commitment to safety. Ultimately, this letter will become part of a larger management plan that summarizes how your entire SMS program works, including specific guidelines for aspects that we'll be discussing later in the video. You'll need to update this document as you decide how to tackle each required attribute. For now, just focus on establishing your commitment to a higher safety culture. The rest will follow. Safety promotion is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's getting people on board and interested in the pursuit of higher safety. It's making sure that every act of every person within the company, from the owner on down to the newest employee, projects your organization's commitment to safety in everything they do. This means you have to keep them informed about what your safety policies are and convey the importance of maintaining health and wellness in the workplace. And that is the third safety attribute. You need to create specific directives that ensure each individual understands your safety policy, what is important to your company, and the limits that you want to set. Your safety policy creates the bright lines that shouldn't be crossed. It's also important to promote safety awareness among your vendors and clients, because they should be as much a part of your safety culture as anyone. Let them know about your operational limits and the policies you've put in place to ensure a safe outcome for the work that you do. It's important to make sure that your staff never feels pressured into a situation where they might jeopardize safety, thinking it's for the good of the company. You have to be clear and unambiguous about your expectations to prevent this. Sometimes the staff might have to say no to a certain job or request. They have to be comfortable doing this and know exactly how and when it should happen. At first, it might seem as though safety is only costing your company time, money, and opportunities. But as you build your safety management system, you'll discover that the business case for safety is just as rewarding as the safety case for safety. One of the most important things in any business is protecting the people and equipment that keep it running. Replacing equipment is expensive. It may cause delays. You might have a one-of-a-kind piece of equipment that would take years for someone to build another for you. Replacing personnel is difficult. You have to find them, you have to recruit them, you have to train them, and then they have to work the job for a reasonable amount of time before they come up to the level of someone who might have been there and been experiencing the job before. All of those things are direct costs to the business. So if you're able to reduce or eliminate errors, accidents, incidents, or loss of personnel, you're going to improve your bottom line. Organized management of documents and data is necessary to make safe, informed decisions, both operationally and within the administration of your SMS. On the operations side, you need to make sure that your staff has up-to-date reference materials, regulatory information, and company documents. And you need to develop a method to make sure that those materials stay up to date. For your SMS, you need to develop a method of recording and organizing data about your operations. That information can serve as a warning or notice that you're coming close to a safety boundary, or alert you to something in your system that needs to be adjusted or looked at. But if you were to take that information just piece by piece in a vacuum, you'd never be able to connect the dots and recognize the cumulative hazards that exist between different elements in your system. When you put the information together in some type of file or place where you can see it all at once, you'll see the dots begin to connect. That's the value of an organized system. It allows you to cross-reference data and find trends or dangers that are hidden between them. What you'll find as you're doing this is that all of your company documents are useful to your safety effort. Some more than others, but they all contain bits of knowledge that just might foretell a costly event. There are record-keeping requirements that you already deal with that will continue, and there will be some new record-keeping requirements for your safety system that will require you to create files and keep track of additional data. For these things, you're going to need some kind of storage medium, like a computer or maybe just a notebook, something where you can record the data and review it later. Hazard identification and risk management are part of the core of the safety management system. These are the main processes that will allow you to recognize and address dangerous conditions before they become part of an accident. The terminology used to describe these processes might make them seem complex, but the principle behind them is exceedingly simple. Hazard identification and risk management are nothing more than recognizing a dangerous condition, foreseeing a risk that condition poses to safety, and then doing something about it. The challenge of these processes is dealing with the fact that not all risks and hazards will be blatantly obvious. So one of the skills you have to develop is the ability to project, the ability to look at a situation and recognize all the ways it could fail. It's more challenging than an accident investigation because in an accident investigation, you have an event and you can backtrack to find the cause. In hazard identification, you probably won't have an event, nor will you have the certainty that comes with hindsight. What you'll have is just a cause or causes of an accident that hasn't happened yet. You'll need to employ some level of imagination to be able to say, if I do this, it could lead to this, which could lead to that, which could lead to an accident. It's a skill that you have to develop because people normally don't want to think about bad things happening. The challenge doesn't stop there, though. Once you start looking for hazards, you might be amazed at how many you find. Organizing and addressing them can quickly become a daunting task, but it's a necessary one. A useful tool for organizing and addressing hazards is a risk matrix. A risk matrix essentially assigns a value to a risk, from high to low, based on the severity of the risk, and also based on the likelihood of the occurrence. If the risk is something that might happen once every 10 years, that's a lot different than if the risk could happen once a day. The value of the matrix is that it allows you to concentrate your safety efforts on the most likely occurrences and the most severe occurrences. Well, you certainly want to take care of every possible risk that you can. It makes a lot more sense to address the large risks or the most likely risks before the less significant ones. And if you have limited assets to devote to that task, then it becomes even more important. Occurrence and hazard reporting is a system that's designed to feed into your risk management process. Unfortunately, you alone will not be able to imagine every possible hazard from an armchair. So you need to have a system in place where people can report occurrences and hazards that they encounter in the field. When something out of the norm happens, something unusual, something unexpected, or something that causes concern for whatever reason, someone needs to write it down or call it in and make a record of it. Pretty soon you'll get a list of these things, and when you have a list, you can evaluate and ask yourself, are there any common elements? Is there an operation that we do with our aircraft that doesn't go right more often than it does go right? Or is there an operation that usually goes right but has been approaching a limit recently? Like a hot start on an engine. An engine hot start can cost a company $100,000. But your pilots may have started the engine 1,000 times without ever having a hot start, and one day they go to start the engine, and it costs you $100,000. What if you had seen that your pilot had recorded 3 near misses with a hot start last month? It didn't hit 1,000 degrees, but it stayed over 800 degrees for a while. If you didn't write that down and you didn't know that it was happening, you wouldn't be able to make the assumption that if this is happening 3 or 4 times and almost getting to the accident level, sooner or later, somebody's going to have an accident. That's the value of reporting hazards and occurrences. You can take care of potential issues while they're still just potential. Take the hot start example. When you're able to recognize early indications of a problem, you get the opportunity to choose between spending a few $100s on some extra training for your pilot or betting $100,000 that the problem will work itself out. Your options get much narrower when the first indication of trouble is a melted turbine. Occurrence reporting can be a tough thing to deal with. It means fessing up to embarrassing, expensive, or just dumb things that might have happened, so they don't happen to somebody else. So one of the critical things that you have to establish, and one of the first things that you should establish in the management plan, is your commitment to a just culture. A just culture is an understanding between everyone in the organization that the organization is made up of human beings. Human beings make mistakes, and our interest is much more in the what and the why than the who of a mistake. It means that management has confidence in the people who work for them and trusts that if something happens, they'll tell them that it happened, because they're not in fear of losing their job, because they're not in fear of suffering any kind of ridicule or harassment, They'll be doing it because that's what you do in an organization that has a good safety culture. You want to protect the rest of the people that work there, so you're going to stand up and admit what happened. The responsibility of management, when someone does that, is to react exactly the way they said they would. To look at the what and the why, not the who. That is not to say that someone who does something on purpose or with malice, or who does something that is just so irresponsible or costly that it's beyond what your company can tolerate, can't be punished to the point of being terminated, perhaps. But generally, before you get to that step, you're going to focus on what and why, not punishment and reprisals. Because the only way you can learn from mistakes is if people feel comfortable enough to admit them. Even though you have a safety management system where you'd like to think that you can prevent occurrences and accidents, they're going to happen. Ideally, your safety program will limit the frequency and severity of occurrence, but when they happen, you need to be ready to investigate so you can learn from them. In many ways, an occurrence is easier to analyze than risk because you have a completed sequence of events, tangible evidence, and you can work backwards to determine where, in a timeline of events, standard procedure failed and the accident sequence began. It's important to document and follow up on what you find, because the conditions that led to the occurrence were not caught by whatever safety control measures you had in place. There might be a weak spot in your system, or there might be a new combination of conditions or warning signs that you need to be looking out for in the future. You want to use everything that happens in your safety management system as a preventative tool to keep accidents and occurrences from reoccurring or escalating. One of the things you want to do in a safety management system is you want to make sure that the actions you're taking are not causing unintended consequences. If you're preventing an incident, but the prevention of that incident is causing an accident, you haven't really accomplished anything. All you've done is elevate the incident. So you have to put programs in effect that let you observe all your practices to make sure that they're having the effect that you wanted them to have, that they're having safe effects rather than unintended consequences. And the way you do that is by measuring what's going on in the different processes. You look for a process that's not having the desired outcome, and then you say, what and why. Yogi Berra says, you can see a lot just by watching. And that's what you have to do. You have to build programs into your safety management system that allow you to see what you're doing and to make sure that you're doing it correctly. A safety management system is a dynamic system. You're always trying to make it a little better. The safety management training requirements function on a very simple principle. If you don't train people how to do something, they'll individually do it however they think it should be accomplished. That's really counterproductive when you're trying to implement a safety system based on data, standards, and measurements. Irregularities are exactly what you don't want. Take hazard reporting, for example. If everyone submits hazard reports in their own way, with information strewn in different places, using different methods of description or nomenclature, it makes the task of analyzing data much harder, especially as time goes by and you amass more and more reports. Having some semblance of uniformity will make it easier to recognize and tabulate trends, and that will afford you more time to improve other aspects of your program, tend to other business, or just enjoy life. All it takes is some basic initial guidance and some recurrent reminders. Train people to do what you want, and that way they won't do what you don't want. Management of change is probably one of the most difficult things in the safety management system, because change is difficult for all of us in pretty much everything that we do. People develop a comfort level with what they're doing and how they do it. If you change something, especially when it's part of a deeply ingrained routine, you can see a reaction in people almost immediately. There's discomfort, hesitation, confusion. Some people will actively oppose the new process. They can't do things as fast as they used to be able to do them, and there's this general period when nobody feels quite at ease. So what you have to do is try and limit the amount of change that people have to deal with at any one time. The other hazard of change that you have to watch out for is the introduction of new elements to your operations. New elements create new risks, sometimes directly or sometimes in the way that they interact with other elements of your operation. When there's a major change in how you're doing something, you might as well go back to the basics. You're going to have to review your existing procedures and update them to make sure that the new change is being accounted for. You're also essentially going to have to retrain people because they're doing something that's entirely different, or they're doing it in a different way, or they're using new equipment, or they're in a different location. So it's important that you take a moment early in the process to make sure that everyone is comfortable, prepared, and on the same page. A final requirement for managing change that probably seems pretty obvious is that you have to be aware that change is going on. Remember that change might not always be something that you initiate, so you have to keep an eye out for elements around you that are shifting. Every business has the potential to have a serious incident or accident, and oftentimes the outcome or scope of that incident or accident is determined within a very narrow window of time after it occurs. Because of this, you have to plan ahead. You have to think about your worst case scenario so you can react to an accident in a reasonably calm, methodical manner. The way to make sure that you're prepared for that is to develop an emergency plan and look at your business from the standpoint of what is the worst possible thing that could happen to us. If that happens, what do we have to do to keep functioning? What does the pilot have to do? What does the director of operations have to do? What does the public relations person have to do? How do we take care of sick and injured people? How do we notify next of kin? You have to be prepared. And you have to recognize the fact that a serious accident is going to cause people to react in as many different ways as you can imagine. From panic to denial to guilt to not even being able to move. All of those kinds of emotions. People can be a lot more emotional under stress than they might seem normally. And you might not know how they're going to react. So you have to plan ahead. Because people suffering emotional trauma are not ideally suited to formulate thorough and rational response plans. A plan enables them, in the heat of the moment, to be able to say, okay, I know Joe's hurt, but I also know this is what I have to do right now to make sure that we can effectively help him. Performance measurement in a safety management system is all about baby steps. Sometimes you don't realize how far you've come or understand the direction you're heading until you turn around and trace your steps back to the beginning. Anything that you try to accomplish in business, you need to measure. You need to look at your safety management and see, is it making us any safer? Or is it just making it more difficult for us to do things? Are we accomplishing the goal that we set out to accomplish? Are we reducing accidents? Are we reducing injuries? Are we reducing costs and damage to equipment? Or are we causing damage? Are we causing injuries? You have to measure the program because you've got to be able to go back and change it if it's not accomplishing what you wanted. We use a checklist in the cockpit to make sure we're doing everything required to have a successful flight. And we use a manual in the repair shop to make sure we're building equipment exactly as it should be. An SMS does the exact same thing for our safety efforts. It's there for us to make sure that every bit of knowledge we've gained about things that can threaten our health and safety is being used in the most effective way possible. Albert Einstein said, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." In the helicopter industry, we continue to see the same accidents happening over and over again. The names and dates change, but not the incidents themselves. If we want to break this cycle, something has to change. That is why systematic safety has become such an interest to regulatory organizations worldwide. We are truly fortunate to fly in this day and age. The hardships suffered by our predecessors have alerted us to virtually every type of hazard imaginable, sometimes through pain, sometimes through death. For those early pioneers, safety was a function of theory and abstraction. But today, we only need to apply what is known and certain. It's an advantage that they would have relished, and one that we must learn to use to greater effect. Safety management systems allow us to organize and apply what we know and what we continue to learn in a tangible, measurable way that will hopefully allow us to better control the risks and hazards that threaten our safety. Now you've got all the information you need to develop your own safety management system. Remember, you can download the toolkit at the IHST website, ihst.org. Or you can call us at HAI, and we'll help you. I promise. Let's be careful out there.